We haven't seen it, so I can see there won't be any conversation for a while.
You started?
Yeah. That's all right. Enjoy yourself.
So we were talking in the car about the karma kind of disappears once you're realized, and that you've said that, and I kind of offered my interpretation. I was curious whether it seems to me that you eventually let go of the story of your life doesn't matter in the sense of the activities, the personality. What's happening seems to have less importance, and then so karma has no effect because it doesn't.
That's true, but that's not. But there's a reason for that. That's just a sort of a byproduct. The reason is because you discover that all patterning is incoherent. All patterning is divergent. Information is divergent. It's just kind of interesting, actually. It's getting sort of theoretical. But basically, to tell what anything is, you're looking at a pattern, right? And the closer you look at a pattern, the more information you get, and the more information you accumulate diverges from the other from the previous information you had. So you study the pieces, the new pieces you've discovered, and that information diverges. So in other words, the closer you look at anything, in a certain sense, the less you know about it in terms of what it is, because the information you accumulate by studying it doesn't converge into a simplicity or into a wholeness or into an entity, a way that it is. On the contrary, it diverges. So, and in realization, one discovers this. One discovers the divergent, you've heard me use the word unresolvable. That's what this refers to. Patterns, the patterns that appear in experience are unresolvable. If you look at what they really are. If you don't look at what they really are and just generalize, create a caricature of them, then they can seem to resolve. You can pretend to know what things are. But if you, which is sort of, these days it's the equivalent of what they're calling fake news. and so when you think you know what something is, you're basically telling yourself fake news. If you do the math and look at what's really present, you won't find anything that resolves into a coherent whole. So karma disappears because karma is made of patterns that are not actually any particular way that you can resolve. So it's not like the event that you've been calling, the eventfulness that you've been used to calling karma doesn't disappear, but it's no longer karma because it isn't anything. It's a field of infinite light or energy. And as a result, because that becomes clear, then naturally all the things you talked about are corollaries to that. It becomes much less interesting when you realize it was all hot air.
Mm.
So this fake news, is there alt awareness?
Sorry?
Is there alt awareness?
No, actually not. Awareness is always real. There's no fake awareness. But there's a lot of fake news about real awareness. Because like anything else, awareness doesn't resolve into being a particular thing that you can actually find and pin down anyway.
So with karma, the basic sort of element of seeming structuration is like a pairing, like a tit for tat. Like this happened in the past, so this second thing must happen now, so that.
Well, that's true. That's getting several generations away. Just that this happened in the past, even that doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And then if you want to look at cause and effect, oh, this happened, so that caused this, and that doesn't stand up to scrutiny because you can't find the that. You can't pin down what the that is, and you can't pin down what the this is, and you can't pin down if they're actually causally related. You can't verify it. I mean, causality is a hypothesis, it's a theory, and it can't actually be found. Because, for the same reason, because if you go looking, if you try and find causality, like, oh, I found that this is causality, I have evidence, the information that you're looking at diverges. It doesn't cohere into a single condition that, oh, that's causality, now I found it.
Doesn't causality imply time?
Well, yeah, I mean, all of that, you know, the causality, time, event, you know, whatever, interaction. I mean, you know, you can sort of peel off a lot of different sort of sub-corollaries, but it's all in the same boat. They're all fine as sort of hand-waving assumptions until you look closely at what's actually there, and then it gets weird. And you look closer and it gets even weirder. And you look closer than that, it gets even weirder still. And then you discover, oh wow, I've discovered weird. That's interesting. I lost causality in time and space and karma and entities, but I found weird.
The sense of lacking desire, it's the same sort of or a similar sort of structuring principle, right?
Yes and no. There's more the presence of the experience of it is actual, but it's not lack or desire. But holding the actuality to be lack and desire is oversimplifying. It's concretizing something which cannot be resolved. All experiential energies are actual, but they aren't anything in particular. So you can't say, oh, this is this, and this is desire, and this is whatever, fear, or you know, I don't know. Because you can't verify that desire actually is desire. On the other hand, what you may designate as an apparent experience of desire appearing is actual. But what's actually going on is not accurately describable in those terms. It's radiant presence.
I just think about like it seems like there's a sort of shifting in my sense of desire that's been going on. I just think about like how I've been sort of driven in the past, like desire for recognition from people, or like fame or ambition or whatever, success, or getting a girlfriend, or whatever. And there's a sort of desiring where one senses like the absence of something, or one imagines the absence of something, and then tries to fill that
Right.
which one imagines to be absent.
Right.
And then there's another sort of desire that's just like a desire for fullness, and that's this kind of immediately filled, right? But, like I just think about that in terms of like it seems strange from the old perspective, right? That that there's part of me feels like, well, it's strange that like I can come to these meetings and you don't seem to expect anything from me, right? So it's not like there's not something that needs to be fulfilled, not like an expectation.
Right.
There's just like that there is this like great hunger, right? Which seems to be like that itself is like the ticket to I don't know to access the fullness, right?
Yeah, sure. And that's genuine.
Yeah.
Actuality itself is completely intoxicated with itself. Actuality itself is not plain vanilla. It doesn't just sort of sit here inertly. It moves into itself voraciously and unstoppably. And you can call this a life force, you can call it the flow of time, the flow of events, you can call it all these, different euphemisms. But this is intrinsically dynamic. I mean, that's why I like this term radiant. It's dynamic. It radiates into itself as all this apparent eventfulness, as all of this self-engagement. And so that's very genuine. And we experience that very directly in the life force, and while you get out of bed in the morning, when you're hungry, when you're curious, curiosity, interest, all of these things are very naked and direct manifestations of the intrinsic self-engagement of actuality with itself. Actuality as, in terms of an apparent individual experience, actuality as the perceiver, the self, and actuality as the perceived, as the apparent, environment and objects and events and all of that. But they're all actually the same thing. So it's the same thing engaged with itself as all this. But of course, there's no all this. It just looks that way. All that there really is the self-engagement.
You talked about intimate engagement with what is, or open-ended engagement.
Sure. Yeah. And that's intrinsic. That's not something that you can do or not do. That's intrinsic in what you are and what this is.
Yeah, it just seems it seems strange, because like I feel that when like I'm around you, like this sort of open-ended openness and warmth, right? It's like I've been thinking about it recently. It's like standing in the midst of this sort of sea of warm milk or something like that. and it's like there's this great hunger, and I just all I need to do is open my mouth to be fed. Right? and it's just this, and like the more I'm fed, the hungrier I get in some sense. But then there's always this sort of immediate, like the open access to that.
Yeah, it's not about quenching the hunger or stopping the hunger or reaching some finality with the hunger. It's about settling into the hunger as the sole event. The hunger is the transcendental, is the radiant presence. You can think of it as the shining forth of the life force. Or you can think of it as the Big Bang if you're, more materialist science or inclined. But it's not about quenching the hunger. It's about surfing the hunger, engaging the hunger, being the hunger. And then it's not actually hunger. It's actually a infinitely transcendental, hyper refined. It's like curiosity.
So being that hunger is just feeling engaged with everything.
Feeling alive.
Yeah.
Sure. And life is engagement.
I think the last time you were talking at the lunch, you were responding to that one woman who was asking about service, and you were saying everything is engaged with the process of opening to a realization or something like that. Right. So there are things that seem to be more readily participating with that process.
There's just apparent degrees of efficiency and apparent degrees of turbulence or directness, but that's irrelevant.
So you holding these meetings, aren't you doing more service than some other ordinary person?
I don't know. You can't resolve that. You can't tell what's happening here.
Yeah.
And if you look at what's happening here, try and pin it down. Exactly what's happening here. What are you doing? What am I doing? You look at it, and it just gets weirder and weirder.
But there's a way in which, right, there's a sort of openness of engagement that you demonstrate and that you sort of transmit, right? I just think about, I guess I shouldn't compare, but I lead that one little sangha, right? And there's like expectation that I have of people and resentments that crop up, and I don't feel like I'm doing the same sort of openness and engagement there.
Well, it's the same open engagement, but it's being with itself in terms of inaccurate categorizings, which is just an immature version of the same thing. Or you could say, think of it as immature is not a good way to think of it. Think of it as a more convoluted way or less efficient version of the same thing. As this opens to itself and realizes itself, it becomes more efficient. So it doesn't need to generate these convolutions and apparent complexities in terms of its own self-engagement.
Okay, and like another way of talking about that is like that the practice is always about sort of returning oneself to the genesis of conception.
Sure.
Yeah. So like an inefficient way of participating is to go off on stories and conceptualizations that are inaccurate.
Yes. Yeah, that's more inefficient. But it's still the same thing. It's the same process. It's the same self-engagement of actuality with itself. It's just doing it in a more baroque, convoluted fashion, apparently.
But because you're more mature with your noticing and you've done the math and all these different ways that you just sort of rest in that, I don't know, at the genesis of conception or something.
Yeah, sure. I mean, more or less, whatever, maybe in that general direction. After a while, yardsticks kind of disappear, so. But all energies are genuine. They just aren't what you think they are. But the energies themselves are genuine. They're actual. They're the energy. The energy is the presence of actuality, of what we call energy. Basically, any experience, any present experiential quality whatsoever. Perception or motivation or whatever. It's all the genuine radiance, the genuine upwelling of the life force. And if you look at it in terms of individual, you can think of it in terms of life force, what we usually mean by that, but it's the life force of reality itself. Because that's the true life. The actual life is the life of actuality. Actuality is alive, is life. And it is forceful. That's the radiance that shines forth. It's an intrinsic dynamism. Apparently. I mean, again, you can't actually resolve that it really is that. But that's a relatively profound way of symbolizing it.
So some people's engagement with energies of life or actuality seems to put them in more of like a clear trajectory. Like their curious engagement seems to be steadfastly in a certain direction, and then others seem more scattershot.
Yeah, it's very curious. All these apparent sub-entities seem to have their own individual nature and their own individual, you can think tendencies. But of course, you can never resolve or get to the bottom of what that actually is.
But if that engagement of theirs were more mature, wouldn't it be more streamlined?
Yeah, as it gets more mature, it gets more streamlined.
More streamlined.
But to get more mature, it kind of has to be more streamlined. I mean, it's not a simple linear cause and effect type process. Water will be water. It's not going to all of a sudden, without major environmental activities, it's not going to all of a sudden turn into fire. A human being will be a human being. An ant will be an ant. So why do these apparent subsystems, these apparent, foci of actuality, why are they where they are? Why are they different? But again, of course, that question is more of a koan, because you can't actually answer it. You can't get to the bottom of what anything is. You can't get to the bottom of whether they are actual subsystems or whether they are actual entities or whether they are anything whatsoever. It's just a way. It's just kind of what it looks like. And the more you settle into actuality itself, the more you settle into the actuality of radiant presence, the more all of these apparent, different points of view converge without being explained.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about water. It's interesting because, water could be dammed up, or it could be flowing in a gushing stream, or it could be evaporating. And it's all the nature of itself.
Or it can be hit by a lightning bolt and turned into plasma,
Yeah.
broken up into, subatomic particles or whatever, the electrons split off. I mean, who knows what? Anything can happen. Why does one electron end up being, in a water molecule, and why does one electron end up being, in the sun, and why, whatever. I mean, all this is infinity of different apparent perspectives, each with its universe of implications in terms of structurality and functionality, all different from each other. And then, of course, we're familiar in terms of living entities. Of course, that's very manifest and very clear. But in a profound sense, it's the sameness that's the important information. The sameness happens to present as infinite differentiation, but in presenting as infinite differentiation, it does not depart from itself at all. So there's only one radiant presence, and that there is one radiant presence happens to look like all this, without there being an all this, other than one radiant presence that looks like all this. So in that's the one sense in which inquiry converges. Yeah. When you look into anything far enough, you find nothing but radiant presence. Even though the information itself keeps diverging, but it's all evidence of the radiant presence.
Well, yeah. Then there seems to be this kind of, experience of that, such that that's there no matter what you look at or how you.
Yeah, well, exactly. When it begins to get a sense of itself, then whatever it's looking at, that's what it's actually seeing. And of course, more so, the more strongly it recognizes itself.
So the reason that you say that the patterning is actually unpatterned is that what we're imagining as patterns of, say, like points of experience or points of light or points of energy arranged in a particular way, that those actual imagine are appearing as patterns, those things themselves can't be found as, they actually don't resolve either. So in a sense,
right. Nothing.
That's the unpatterned nature of.
Yeah, absolutely,
of
absolutely nothing resolves. Any particular pattern itself doesn't resolve into coherence. The elements that seem to constitute that pattern don't resolve into coherence. The apparent conditions that entity or pattern seems to exist in doesn't resolve into coherence in terms of what it is, what its nature is, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So you look into anything and you never get answers, you just get more questions.
Right, so all the points of light in the constellation that appear at one level, let's say, to look like shape in a particular shape,
Uh-huh.
and then you look at what constitutes that shape, let's say the lights, and you look more carefully, more closely, and the light, as you say, it continues to diverge. It doesn't, you can't really even say what that point of light actually is as an experience.
Yeah. And you
so
look
in a
into
sense, the light, there aren't points of light.
Yeah, exactly. You look into it more, and even whether it's in space or in time, doesn't stand up. Nothing, absolutely no, no actual condition to orient to can be found. It's impossible to orient. In other words, all this stuff is indeterminate, but it's all existing in relation to that. There's no that. It's all. Everything is. I'm not putting this very well. So say you look at a constellation, and the constellation is just stars. Say you look at a star is light. Say you look at a star more closely, you get out your radio telescope, and you get all the Nobel Prize physicists together, and you're all studying it and looking at the star, and all of a sudden, well, it's curved gravity. Well, but you can't actually find the gravity, and then it's energy, 0 point energy coalescing into quantum events, but you can't actually find those, and I mean whatever. And so you just keep looking, and you're just peeling layers of an onion, and you never. So you start with a constellation, and you end up with no space and no time and no matter, and you still haven't gotten to the bottom.
It's cool because it seems like not seems, but it's whether you're doing it sort of objectively in that sort of way, and
anyway,
kind of, or you look at it, if you will, subjectively as experience,
it's just the
you
same.
end up with the same thing.
Exactly the same. The condition of unresolvability is absolutely applies across the board. It even applies to even unresolvability itself applies to itself. It's unresolvable. That unresolvability is unresolvability. It doesn't resolve. So you look at that, you see that you do play with that. Excuse me. You play with that, and you see the way in which that's so, and everything disappears without negating it, without negating anything, without canceling anything out. But nothing is, everything is just, can't say. Which clears the air.
Yeah.
in terms of invalidating all the sort of assumptions and projections that the mind typically generates, and then there's just enjoyment of the actuality. The open-endedness of the actuality is pure pleasure, it's pure enjoyment, it's fascinating. It doesn't need to be anything in particular to be amazing and beautiful, and
Well, this without the expectation of finding. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, totally.
It somehow that there's that. I don't know how that happened, but there's this kind of I guess a shift or a critical mass or something, where you just aren't looking anymore in that same way.
Yeah.
And maybe for some people it's in big box, but it just occurs that it's no longer the premise of things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really quite lovely. And as one begins to unfold into realization, by degrees or whatever, there's these various perspectives that seem to present themselves that are mind-blowing and beautiful and meaningful and profound. but temporary. There's never a way that things are, and although as one opens, one relaxes the old ways that things seem to be, and then discovers a new kind of openness, and then that may dissolve, and there's just this endless sort of free fall into whatever.
Well, even as far as I can experience it, even all the seemingly old points of knowing or thinking something in particular, they themselves are of the same quality, and so
of course.
It becomes kind of humorous and interesting and really quite absurd at the same time. That you hold on to anything as being true and the right thing.
Sure, absolutely.
But even on a much more intimate scale, just that anything is a shape, or a certain way. It is, and it's, well, as you keep saying, it's always more another than that.
Yeah.
But that actual experience is just kind of this folding in of moving into something, and you never know what it is. But there's no longer an explanation to make it into something.
Yeah. Even as the mind makes it into something, that's just more weirdness. And that, again, because all these mechanisms aren't negated, but even those mechanisms aren't that. They aren't mechanisms, and it isn't mind. It's just more flavors of unresolvable weirdness.
Yeah, they become almost like a light show in and of themselves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Is there an increase in sort of elegance or simplicity that's revealed?
It depends what you mean by, I would say elegance, yes, definitely. Simplicity, it depends what you mean by that word.
So you could say increasing complexification as well.
There's infinite complexity, literally infinite, without it being actual complexity. And the sense in which the complexity is simple is the sense of its elegance, that it is the infinite, unresolvable, infinite complexity of this that is just this and doesn't depart from being just this. So in a certain sense, it's completely settled in itself, even as it presents as infinite unsettlement, perhaps. When we think logically, you make conceptual thought. Singleness is the opposite of multiplicity. In actuality, singleness is not the opposite of multiplicity, which is illogical. But logic cannot approach the nature of what this is. What this is fundamentally irrational. So the fact that this is infinitely complex doesn't mean it's not single. And as one settles into this, as you see the way that that's so, and the singleness that it is doesn't cancel out or in any way have any tension with the complexity. There's a kind of a image that I kind of like. I mean, it's more kind of a joke than anything else, but it's very pleasing. There's an old saying of A circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. So the center that's everywhere is the singleness, and the circumference that's nowhere is the infinite multiplicity. But again, it's not logical, so it's not very useful for analysis. But again, analysis is useless for anything. So, you know. Excuse me.
So what are you doing when you're parsing all this stuff if it's not analyzing in some way?
What do you mean?
So you're not analyzing at all?
Me, no.
No. But it seems like you're articulating and parsing and how things are exactly.
What do I do when I do that? I'm tracing approximate shapes. It's like if you look out that window and you say, "What's that tree?" And I go over to the window and I draw a shape like this. You know, that's the tree. So if you look through that, you'll see the tree, but that's not the tree. So what I say isn't what I'm talking about. But if you line it up a certain way, it's kind of an approximate silhouette of something that you can look through to see what it actually is, without being accurate. It's less analysis and more seeing, I would say. Thinking of it like lining up points of view is probably more what it feels like to me.
Well, in a way, you know, everything you say, and in my experience, it's kind of like, it's like all koans, you know, it's all like little ripples of koan, and
Yeah, well, that's all you can say. You can't say what it is. So all you can do is say things that may somehow be jumping off points to what it is, or have some implication in some way.
well, one of the things that happens in working with koans, again, in my experience, is that you go along just living your life and doing this and that, and like you say, suddenly something will kind of line up or arrive in a way that makes sense, kind of, well, nonsense, you know, a koan sense. You get it in some way, but you get it out of the actual experience of this.
Yeah.
And the words are helpful because they give you a kind of, I don't know what exactly.
Well, the words are related to the actuality, but they aren't one-to-one correlation. But there is a relationship.
I experience it as a kind of, I mean, it's my own experience. It feels like a kind of logic in the sense that whatever ironically or paradoxically reveals something utterly non-logic and utterly, I mean, to me, when you speak about, or one speaks about looking at experience and seeing the way in which it can't be captured by interpretation, that's a very logical statement. That's a logic, to me, it's a kind of a reasoned way of thinking about reality.
It's logical. It's logical from the side of trying to capture it.
Yes.
But
the actual looking reveals the fact that reality can't be captured by logic and reason and analysis. That's sort of that's the funny thing about teachings, that they, but it's the power also of language is powerful in my experience. It has its own evocative capacity to, in ways that I don't fully understand, but it seems to. I experience it.
Well, language is form that specifically embodies intelligence. And intelligence is meaning. But again, the meaning that the language actually embodies is not reflected in a one-to-one orientation with the structure or the internal logic of the language in its own terms. But that doesn't make language any less a vehicle of intelligence, even if it's not the vehicle of intelligence that language internally pretends to be.
But it is wild because if you make a distinction, like, I mean, Dao was saying, like, parsing realities, you make a distinction between actuality and then the interpretation of that actuality. So you make it sort of a language distinction between two dimensions of reality and sense. And in order to even hear that and make some seeming sense of that, there's some apparent reference to what interpretation is, experientially. And that just happens like automatically. Like I hear the word, or we hear the word interpretation, and we have some sense of what that constellation of pattern lights is referring to experientially.
Right.
And yet, what's to me kind of remarkable is that there's some sense of knowing what that is, and then when you actually go to look for what it is, just like the star analogy, you come up empty-handed, you can't find it. But we have this thing called language that appears to be referring to aspects of experience or qualities of experience, which is how communication is occurring right now.
Yeah.
And to me, it's astounding.
Well, it is astounding.
It's just.
But it's evidence of the inherent intelligence. You know, all form is pure intelligence, nothing other than pure intelligence. There's nothing here than pure intelligence. So given that, it's not surprising that form embodies meaning. But the way in which it does so is according to the nature of the inherent intelligence, not according to the nature of rational, logical intelligence and the theories of symbolization and so on and so forth.
Right.
The inherent intelligence doesn't work like that.
No.
Inherent intelligence is entirely transcendental and infinite.
Well, and it's inherent.
Yeah, it's inherent.
It's not separate.
No, it's already here. It's already fully on.
I mean, really, just on kind of a simple level, speaking of simplicity, you can just look at anything, take a bowl of glass, flour, and just kind of grok what it's speaking, what it is, what that intelligence is shining out to do. And it's really quite clear as that.
The radiant presence is not hidden. It's not hidden at all. It's completely explicit. It's easy to not recognize it if one is seduced into orienting to things as if they were the finite entities and ideas that it's possible to imagine they are.
It seems like such a subtle and like the tiniest little shifts from the one to the other.
It's tiny. It's minuscule. It's nothing.
Yeah. It's just like.
So radiant presence doesn't have any depth to it. There's certainly no hidden depth, but it has a certain expansiveness.
It has infinite depth, but it is also entirely, all of it is present.
So what do you mean by that?
Capacity for moreness, capacity for otherness. But any, this is radiant presence, that is all radiant presence. But that doesn't mean that you've shrunk anything, you made it shallow. But this is radiant presence, and this radiant presence right there, that is all radiant presence, is infinitely deep. Doesn't make any sense. But that's, in terms of the yoga, that's one of the really wonderful things about it. Anywhere you look, what you see is the totality, is everything. It's not like, oh, that's some of it, now let me get the rest. If you see radiant presence, you're seeing the full Monty.
But then you still have to do the math, as you say.
That's just a matter of basically the process of abandoning unnecessary inefficiencies. And you don't have to, because the inefficiencies aren't actual. It's not like you gain anything by abandoning the inefficiencies, or you lose anything by being in the inefficiency. There's no realization is not a real advantage. You don't actually gain anything. It's more like taking advantage of the fine print. It's like taking advantage of the loopholes in the tax law.
Part where all the taxes paid back to you.
Yeah.
I imagine that there is something that one gets in the sense of like what we were talking about earlier, right? Like, so there's a sort of warmth and openness that you seem to exude, and that's a result of doing the math, or
You could say that, but the same warmth and openness is everywhere. There's nothing but that.
but there's not like not every individual that I encounter seems to manifest that in the same way. Right? Or
Well, all forms manifest different flavors, number one. And number two, all sorts of, again, complexities can seem to be essential for, let's say, for a given entity in their manifestation of openness and warmth. So the openness and warmth, you could say, or the basic radiance is all that's really happening here, all that's being manifested. But for let's say, for a being who has settled more into that in his native mode, that's sufficient. It's whatever that seems to present as is okay, one way or the other. But for someone perhaps who's less settled into that natural mode, they may be think that it's essential to have various other complex structures involved in the transaction, which may be desires, it may be manipulations, it may be, status negotiations, maybe, all those kinds of things. Sure. Which is really just the radiance, but it's unnecessary complications of that, without which in no way is anything other than the radiance.
You were using the term the other day, purification of afflictions. Is that the same as doing the...
Did I use that term?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like something I would have said. It must have, what was the context? I know you have a photographic memory.
I don't know, you're talking about just because someone hasn't purified all of their afflictions, such and such. I don't know.
What's that?
Because I was, I forget what I was.
I might have been saying it in a joking kind of a way.
Okay.
But anyway, what's the question? Whether or not I said it.
It would seem like this gets back to my usual sort of question about conditioning, right? That it would seem that if someone hasn't settled into their native mode, as you're just talking about, right? Haven't settled in as much, right? And if they are still feeling afflicted or in some ways, if they still have all these sort of complex and necessary
Right.
structures,
Right.
That they would that they would have more potential to sort of cause a certain harm or cause affliction to others that
No. Maybe superficially, perhaps. But in actuality, no, it's impossible to cause harm or cause affliction. There's no such thing. Because there's nothing to be harmed. Everything that we think of as harm, as pleasure or pain, as success and failure, is just the process of the radiance radiating, which is its own intrinsic process. And it may look like that, but it isn't actually that. But on the other hand, it needs to be precisely what it is, and that is you could think of it as the universal process.
But there's people that I'm around where they seem very reactive, right? And I feel like
think of them as the agents of your process. They're there to stimulate you in various ways as part of your process of unfoldment. And if you have some kind of a serious harm or affliction befall you, that's there to stimulate your process of unfoldment.
And my desire to avoid these people is also
that's also there to stimulate your process of unfoldment, and your own complexity and your own clinging to delusions is there for your process. You look at it this way, very simply. Reality forgets itself so that it can find itself. So forgetting itself is part and parcel of its process of coming to explore itself. So getting caught up in all sorts of delusions and stuff is exactly that process. So it's all a win. It's all a plus.
I didn't hear that last part.
Delusion.
Mixed in delusion.
So all apparent event is actually radiance moving into itself. There's no downside, there's no loss, there's no mistakes, there's no bad things. And apparent events includes your desire to avoid certain apparent events, or your desires to achieve certain apparent events. Those are also in themselves events, which are themselves this process.
All right. So I guess what I think about in regard to this is like I keep on returning to my warmth and openness over there, right? And but there's a sense of like I'm not on edge in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a sense of feeling like I can just settle in. I can just sort of rest and open to openness.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Nice.
And Yeah, and that seems like that seems distinct from other situations. Yeah.
So what?
But it seems like there's a sort of you know, training or say like I get a taste of what's here,
Right.
right? And I feel sort of shifting or opening up here,
Uh-huh.
and then going to others that are that put me off or
Right.
piss me off and so so
Right.
right then there's more possibility of remaining open or continuing to open
Great.
in those.
Sounds like a win. We want to take a 10-minute break for a tea break, whatever. We'll be back in 10 minutes.
We have another ice cream to go with it. You will just strange ice cream. Where's the bathroom? There's one here and one in part of the right hand.
I think some of this, I think this.
See another one.
Well, he's old.
Is in fact your own.
He's not.
Oh, he's a native.
He's about 12.
No miles there.
Yeah, I get that sense as well. I mean, like
You're
there's
experiencing yourself.
like there's a tendency of wanting to sort of pawn it off and then accuse him of.
It may be.
He'll bring the table.
Oh, yeah. For, maybe not just him, but, all of us. It may be more noticeable or obvious yourself, but what you're noticing is yourself.
Oh, sure. Well, I think that as well because I notice it with like other teachers now, I think I first noticed it with Peter, and then I noticed it with Amma, and then like Paul Hederman, right? And it seems like the same thing, and it seems like a sort of impersonal thing because I sense it in all of these different people. Right?
So that, and that what it is, it's not a thing, so it's settling into your native mood, it's really just discovering more and more natural and native freedom, with everything, with yourself, and the thing, so to speak. And it's not, you don't have to hold, really, you don't have to hold on to anything. You don't even have to hold on to letting go. Let go of letting go. But, really, that's the beauty and ease of all of this. It's beautiful and easy.
Hey, sweetie pie.
Is it your dog?
No, it's Nancy Davis.
Is it Indian stuff?
The Iranian.
Oh, breakfast? The place where they make this. Yeah.
It's actually empty.
Oh, I like it. Like rose water ice cream too. Have you had that? You get shish kebab there? Yep.
And then we passed my bedtime.
You get up early?
No. I sleep a lot. I don't know if it's my health or what.
How much do you sleep?
About 10 hours a night usually.
You guys sleep that much. 9 or 10 hours. If I get 8, I'll come home and take a nap.
You sleep very well?
Yes, very well. I always sleep well. Very good sleeper.
I got this funny little app that you set your phone like on the nightstand, and it will, it's supposed to record how well you're sleeping. I don't know how well it does it, but it's sort of fun to wake up in the morning and read it. Poor, good, great,
Is that an app?
Yeah, the little app.
What's it called?
You wear something on your body?
No, you literally, you just set it there like on the nightstand next to you. Right? You don't have to touch it or anything. I don't know what it is. It seems to do it differently every night. What's it called?
It's hard to sleep.
My wife has something called a Fitbit, which is like a little thing that you wear on your,
Yeah.
touching your body.
I'm sure that's.
And it records the movement of your body, and it might record your heartbeat or your breathing or something. I don't know what.
Oh, wow.
This is fantastic, the sound of the clouds.
I'm sure it's much more functional than what I'm talking about, but I'll show you.
Is it Tim Cook or John?
No, good morning.
Is it a lake?
Do that or just press like when I want to get up and wake me up to a half an hour before time I set it. If I want to get up at like 8 o'clock, I'll set it for 7, I'll set it for 8 o'clock, but it'll wake me either at 7,
You have a lot of mosquitoes?
7:30 or as early as 7, depending on what sleep cycle I'm in.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's called Good Morning?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Are you on
It
the?
seems to work.
I am now that the door's closed. No, I'm not too, I couldn't be too long. I
Oh,
like to be warm, but I'm good. I'm a sweater, so don't worry about it. However you're comfortable, I'll be fine.
So when it wakes you up earlier than, is it aggravating or?
Oh, no, the whole point is that it wakes you up when you're in a sleep cycle where you're not in deep sleep. So then you're right there.
So it's not an empty shock.
Yeah, that's the theory. And it seems to be, just kind of work. I don't think it's like so precise.
Well, why'd you need to be woken up? Are you retired or?
It's a good word.
I know, been woken up.
In my case, I have. Cool.
My mom is, yeah, I'm now the caretaker, but she lives independently.
No, that was like, they were. I had a bunch of those people on top. the cavities of my eyes. So it's
The cavities that I'm looking at historical.
I kind of wonder if
Yeah.
verbing some sort of impact living. Most places around it with everything about moving swings, but
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm discovering that because I just had community side.
The big.
Which is a good start. It's got two.
Is that the call?
As well.
Oh, this is right there. You talking?
6 weeks. Flipper. This side of the dog.
She walk around?
yeah, she walked around.
What kind of medical help does she need? She needs help, you to help her in your underwear.
No, she does all
Oh,
that
your
stuff.
underwear?
All
All right.
Peter, what do you think about, did you ever watch The Big Bang Theory? Did you get into anything like that?
I don't know it.
Oh, this is just a sitcom, but it's about these physicist guys, like, kind of wondering how far you're interested in science fiction.
I like sci-fi. It's good.
What's gonna happen? Everything else is gonna go.
You're pretty well versed in mathematics. 'Cause
Somewhat.
you said before that like if we knew math, we could talk all about whatever math and radius.
Well, the other side of it is that.
But we would actually have to have some sort of training or understanding.
Not necessarily, mainly with the theories of infinity.
Well, I'm not saying here. It's a long story, but it's down the thing, but. You can get all of this down at one place. And throw it over. Rock and all that one.
Shall we reconvene?
You're starting again?
Sure.
There's a lot of religious traditions that they put this emphasis on service,
Right?
and it would seem the way I've been thinking about it recently is that if that emphasis on service is so as to sort of trick people into a more open engagement with reality, right?
Sure, perhaps. That and it de-emphasizes selfish desire and encourages engagement with for others, which is the contrary of selfish. So it could be an interesting sort of a exercise or technique. But in it, and it's all those kinds of things are remedial. They may or may not be helpful in any given case, but there's what's powerful is seeing what experience is, and whether or not you're helping, you're being in service, whether or not you're compassionate, whether or not you're sitting in meditation 8 hours a day, whether or not you're this, whether or not you're that, is irrelevant if you're not seeing what actuality is, looking into actuality. So And if you are looking into actuality, then whether you are or not doing those other things becomes irrelevant. They may be fun things to do in their own, by all means, be a nice person, be helpful, be supportive, help people, especially if you have an inclination to do so. But it has nothing to do with realization.
The more realized you are, is that the more likely you are to be a kind and generous and decent sort of
I don't know.
person.
I don't know. We can speculate, perhaps, but I don't know.
Do you consider that there are degrees of realization?
Not per se, but it's not degrees of realization. There's degrees of manifestation of realization, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The realization is of one thing.
Yeah.
And in the course of yoga, there can be realization that's not appreciated fully as being realization, and so it's not moved into, so to speak, or inhabited. But in realization proper, realization is recognized as being what it is, and so it's appreciated, and so it takes up residence in it, so, if you like. But nothing's ever static. I mean, realization is a lot like a milepost. You may say there's a milepost out there that says, you're 50 miles from Las Vegas, and when you cross that milepost, then you're closer. You've achieved something. You've crossed a certain threshold, but that doesn't mean the emotion stops.
It doesn't mean you're in Las Vegas.
No. It's a bit of a. I mean, spirituality. There's so much I can say. Spirituality has not done anyone any favors. Has not done any service in spreading all these vast misinformation and rumors and implications that just permeates people's ideas about it.
A big favor for Maya, though.
Huh?
It's not a big favor for Maya.
Maya doesn't care. Maya is realization. It's traditionally you can think of realization as a goal, and spirituality as a process, and you're going from somewhere to somewhere else, and you're not there until you get there, and then once you're there, and you've left where you were, and every single bit of that is completely inaccurate. Realization is seeing what you have always been, and it doesn't change anything whatsoever. Seeing what has always been the case. And the nature of what is seen, and also the nature of the seeing, is completely unstatic. It's not like you see something and there's no finality to it. There is no finality. It's not like a thing that's sitting there inertly and you see it and then you see it and it's a kind of a stasis that's been achieved. It's not like that at all. It's much more like seeing that there's nothing to see. Have you seen something? When you see that there's nothing, when you've always thought there's something to see and you finally see there's nothing to see, have you seen something? I mean, it's kind of actually the opposite. You've kind of stopped. You kind of no longer are hooked on seeing anything.
But you'll sometimes also speak about the paradox of seeing or recognition as one can then partake of the qualities of that which is recognized, in a sense, in a more I don't know if conscious way is the right way to put it, but something about with the recognition of that, it seems as if it brings with it something of value, of tremendous value.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it allows appreciation, you know, of how exquisite and exquisitely amazing this is, which is, you know, the summit of all beauty and perfection and, you know, exquisiteness, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you know, it's pretty hard to.
It's pretty hard to beat that.
It's pretty hard. Yeah, it's pretty hard to think that is not a good thing. Right. On the other hand, all you're doing is appreciating what you could have appreciated at any point, and in fact, you're appreciating what you've always appreciated whenever you've appreciated anything, because there's actually nothing else to appreciate, and all appreciation is actually of actuality, even if it's guised in more baroque structures and complexities. In a way, it's just settling down into, it's just getting stripped down and settling down into efficiency.
And it seems like those qualities that humans aspire to, of beauty and openness and appreciation, it seems like what recognition, what it brings is that then pervades more and more and more aspects of one's reality. More and more, it seems to be not just the province of particular. But beauty is a good example. These are just certain things of beauty, but there's a recognition of beauty present in all things.
But that's always been the case. Again, it's the recognition, you know, so it enables appreciation. Realization is really a loss more than anything. You lose all the unnecessary clutter.
It's quite significant what you lose.
Yeah, it's quite significant because of how unnecessary it has always been, and how incredibly distracting and how incredibly seductive into all sorts of effort and torment it is. So, God, thank God I'm load of that. Thank God I'm free of that load of rubbish.
It seems to me that there's something. What I miss is the giving a damn. You know,
You miss it?
Well,
you still give a damn. I know you. You got all worked up about politics and stuff.
Yeah, I still give a damn, but I don't take it seriously.
Of course not. How could you?
I used to take it very seriously.
Well, of course you did. You saw that mattered.
You miss getting unhappy about politics?
We're still gets unhappy about politics.
I don't actually get unhappy about politics. I've become a fatalist, but that's just politics.
But even that, you know, even the missing there is, yeah, it's kind of sweet.
Everything's just so fascinating. It's all so fascinating. You know, the aspects of you know what one has been, and the aspects of what one is, and the aspects of these transitions, and I mean all this stuff is just so amazing. It's just incredible, mind blowing. I look at my personality, and it's just it's astounding to me. It's mind blowing. You know, it's I used to think it was very important and take it very seriously in a way. But even that I did that is interesting. And all these elements of what it is are, I look at them and it's just amazing. All of these amazing intricacies and these amazing partialities, biases, But one thing that realization does reveal is that only actuality itself has any importance. And all of these little subsystems and all that just don't, at the end of the day, just don't matter a damn. Success and failure doesn't matter a damn. Pleasure and pain don't matter a damn. Nothing matters one tiny little bit. And even thinking that it matters doesn't matter.
Did you say actuality is important?
Yeah, actuality is the only thing that's important.
Even that's not very important.
Well, it's not important because it doesn't need any, you don't need to do anything about it. It doesn't need any defending or any process. It's all intrinsic. The actuality is all meaningfulness, all power, all achievement, all process. Everything is all nothing other than actuality. So it makes it very simple. There's no subsystems to worry about.
So like the sounds of nature there are a lot more pleasant than like gunfire or explosions or something. And
Gunfire and explosions are sounds of nature.
okay.
Where do you think they come from?
Okay, so there's a preference there on my part, and so it starts with a preference, right?
What starts with a preference?
So like a thinking that something has meaning or value or importance or something. Right?
What? You lost me.
So we were just talking about.
If there's a preference, is just the presence of preference. You prefer the sound of both rocks to the sound of gunfire. Okay, given that, that's fine. I do too. But that doesn't mean anything. It just means the presence of a preference.
So there has to be a sort of presence of a sense of self for things to seem to matter, or
Not so much sense of self as sense of a framework of structure within which it seems to matter. If you have a structure, oh, gunfire means that humans are, hurting or killing someone, and that's a terrible thing, and this is a real problem, and they might kill me, and that would be a real problem, and this, and so on and so forth. And so you build this whole imaginary scenario of interpretation that's all related to the presence of gunfire. Or you could also say, well, gunfire is evidence of the presence of these human life forms doing their crazy, peculiar activities, which is evidence of the biosphere, which is evidence of the magnificence of the force of the galaxy. It's not any different. It's the same thing. It's just you're telling yourself a different story. The gunfire is still gunfire. In other words, gunfire is a sound. And that sound exists in the context of all event. At the moment that gunfire is going off, there's ants crawling on the ground, there's birds flying in the tree, there's dirt around, and all of that is the context of that gunfire event happening. So to single out a small part of that, so someone who fired the gun, and they're this and this, that, and you're erecting this small substructure and saying that's important. The ants aren't important. The birds aren't important. The people that aren't firing guns aren't important. It's all of this vast system that's all happening, and it's all the same event. That's the actual pattern. That's the actual context. Maybe it wasn't a gunfire. Maybe it was just a car backfiring. And then, oh no, but cars are burning gasoline and it's destroying the ozone, the atmosphere, and we're all going to die. It's like you can make a horrible story out of anything.
Killer frogs.
Killer frogs. That's right. If you're a mosquito, that is the sound of the death camps. That's the sound of the Gestapo. All event is just nakedly what it is in the context of the entirety. You can't separate one thing out from another. The entire field, the entire experiential field appears at once, and it has no parts and no pieces.
So seeing means no longer partializing?
Yes. Or seeing that infinite basis for partializing exists within the inclusive whole. There's infinite dots and you can connect them up any way you want. But when you connect up dots, you haven't actually made anything new. It's still just a field of infinite dots. And the only thing here is your experiential field. That's the only thing that exists for you. it's vast and everything that's in it is small. The gunshots occur in your experiential field. The whole world occurs in your experiential field.
It seems like the personality is just, it's not even, it's not even really me. You know, it's like these patterns just kind of show up and
Yeah.
I'm going through the motions, but they're not.
Yeah, they're just like subsystems that seem to be autonomously present doing what they do. The mind churns out its mind stuff, and the emotions churn out their emotion stuff, and all of these things are have their own. They respond to the life force by doing what they do and being what they are. But they aren't you. They're just present. They're just subsystems present in the experiential field. And you can look. The experiential field is huge, and mind is a small sub-event in that. Compared to mind to the field of vision. Field of vision is not impeded by mind, so mind isn't bigger than, isn't stepping on the field of vision. It's not everywhere, and so on and so forth. You look, take an inventory of your entire experiential field, and all these little subsystems are just, they have no predominance, they have no size compared to the vastness of the field.
In terms of disengaging with itself, it always feels like I have no control over what's going on in the field. Yet I wonder if it's just that I'm just not recognizing my lack of control, or that if I'm as much a part of not having any, what I do and say and think and all that is just not really under my control either. It's kind of arbitrary.
Everything happens spontaneously, and what you really are is what's doing that. And that you really are is intensely self-engaged with itself, which shows up as your experiential field, within which a very small subset of that is your human persona and your human body and your human life and so on and so forth. And so what you are is doing all that. It's doing it the same, think of a dream. It's doing it the same way the dreamer is dreaming the dream. The persona is being dreamed in the dream may or may not have control, but the dreamer has in complete control how it creates the persona. And the dreamer is who you really are, not just the persona in the dream. You are the persona in the dream, but you are that as a projection of your actual self. You know, the entire dream is, you are the entire dream, because it's all a projection of your actual self when you're dreaming. And exactly the same thing happens here.
So how do you let go of not only identification, but of seeing your own mind as more important than the rest of what's going on in the field?
Again, it comes down to repeated experiments, repeated explorations, and familiarize yourself with the actual, you could say geography, although it's not literally that, of the experiential field, and you'll see that the mind is small. The mind is like one of the sense fields. So here's the field of vision, and the field of hearing is also here. They don't step on each other. And here's the field of touch is here too. They're each in their own little like thought bubbles, or in their own little dimensions. And look, well, where is thought happening? Let me think of thought. I'm thinking, Mary had a little lamb. So where's that thought occurring? It's not occurring in the visual field. It's not occurring in the hearing field unless I say it. And then the sound is occurring, but not the thought. So where's the thought occurring? It's in its own little dimension too, dimension of thought. And then you can look, well, is the dimension of thought the same thing as the field of vision? The dimension of vision? No, they're not. And so you sort of take an inventory of all these different dimensions, and you get a sense of their spatiality. It's not literally spatial, of course. You get a sense of their orientation, and they're each a relatively small little piece of the geography of your experiential field. And you really begin to appreciate how small that is when you start looking at extrasensory things that you can't classify as one of the physical senses, or you can't classify as thought in the sense of thinking. And you can't classify as anything else that you would ordinarily classify. I mean, just all these flavors and vibes and spaces, and that you can't talk about because there's no words for them, because humans sort of acknowledge them. Humans aren't interested in these dimensions because they seem too tenuous. They seem too, they're removed. They're too impersonal, and they're literally impersonal in the sense that they're beyond the personality, but they exist in you. They exist in the experiential field, and there's countless of these dimensions. It's like looking at the solar system. You think the Earth is big. Here's the Earth, right? But if you zoom out above so you can see the whole solar system with like Pluto and the sun and all the planets, the Earth, you wouldn't even be able to see it. It's a tiny little speck because there's all this vast, seemingly empty space. And when we're on Earth, we just think of the space as this empty, meaningless. Who gives a shit about it? There's nothing interesting there. There's nothing to post on Facebook about it. It's just nothing. But when you're out in space, space is everything. And the solar system is a creation of space, not the other way around. The space is the real thing. Space is what matter comes from. It's what the planets come from. And experiential field is just like that. If you just sort of feel your way into completely nonlinear, extrasensory, very subtle flavors, you'll discover this. You'll notice there's this just endless spaces and endless dimensions of just these vibes and entirely transcendental qualities that are impersonal. And then in that context, when you become familiar with that, if you really look at the geography of everything, you'll discover something a lot like the solar system. And yeah, there's the personality, there's the mind, but there's so many things on
Yeah. Well, just seeing thought as a field of its own.
Sure.
suddenly makes it less personal, not my thought.
Well, well, you know about hypnosis. You're a hypnotist. So thoughts, the way thought seems to be so powerful is a hypnotic property of thought itself. Thought claims to be that, and so the consciousness sort of buys it, believes it. You know, thought thinks, I'm thinking about everything and I know everything. I know what everything is and I can tell you about everything and I know what's going on. And, you know, the consciousness goes, oh, okay. But all of that's really just, it's like this little loudspeaker over here, the thoughts like saying, I know what everything is, I know what's going on. But meanwhile, here's the field of vision. And thought doesn't impinge on it. So with thought spinning, it knows everything. Field of vision doesn't care. There's this light here. The light doesn't change. It's not, you know, the thought may as well not be happening. The light's just here. It's absolutely nothing to do with the thought. Touch is just here. It's absolutely nothing to do with the thought. You know, hearing the same thing. And then these other dimensions that are you know, extrasensory. Likewise, they couldn't give a shit about what the thought, you know, the thought propaganda and the mind propaganda that's continually blabbing about how great it is and how it applies to everything.
It's interesting, I mean, maybe to your dream metaphor, but just all the little subsystems that you were speaking about, my own sense is that any of those, again, that you just investigate any of the seemingly small subsystems, and they know they're not small at all, actually. They're unbounded, and you can't find an end to any of those.
Oh, everything is, yeah.
So
Everything is infinite.
It's beautiful because you can look at any aspect of, you know, it's like you don't have to go to something apparently deeper. You just go to the tiniest little contracted subsystem and you realize there's no end to it. You can't find an end to it.
Because there's no objective space. There's infinite zooming in, which creates more space, and there's infinite zooming out, which creates more space. But all these spaces are created by the zooming. There's no actual space. Nothing has any actual size. Size is created. Size is an artifact of perspective. And it's like how big, you know, it's like how big the Earth is. You know, it's fucking huge, right? We're standing here, and then you go to Pluto and tell me how big the Earth is. You know, you can't even see it. How big is the Earth? And so it's the same thing. It hasn't changed, but the perspective is very different. And there's no fixed point that experience comes from. Experience can zoom in and out of itself with absolute flexibility. And because of this, you get all this inconceivably vast, apparent, you know, spatialities and sizes and stuff and dimensions, or smallnesses too. I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience of passing out from over intoxication or something and watched the world shrink down to a dot. Just speculating here. No, there's no size. There really is literally no size. Size, you know, makes itself. You know, it's an artifact of perception.
These extrasensory realms, they can't be very easily articulated. I mean, like
they can't be articulated because human language hasn't come up with words that apply to them, because they don't have things in them. They don't have space in the same way. They don't have activity in the same way.
And the different religious texts, treatises that talk about clairvoyance and clairaudience and stuff like that.
Those are usually in relation, not It depends. Most of those kinds of teachings are usually in relation to a physical perspective. But the physical perspective is not the actual perspective. It's not the ultimate perspective.
But one example of a extrasensory field would be like subtle energy that you pick up on maybe after doing qigong for a long time.
Sure, but that's physically oriented again. Find some space in your experience right now that's outside all your senses. And you can do this so find your visual field. So it's right here, this oval sitting there. Find your field of hearing. It's this sort of weird, whatever, dumbbell-shaped thing floating around somewhere. Find your sense of touch. It's kind of a weird sort of almost body-shaped dimension that's floating around somewhere. Taste and smell. In my case, there's not much of those. Thought, well, that's just this sort of little, it's like a loudspeaker on the rooftop over down there. And then what else is there? What's over here? It's not anywhere in any of those. It's not nothing. It may seem to be almost nothing, but it's not nothing. There is no nothing. So find something in your actual concrete experience that seems to be nothing, and then look at the way it's not nothing and see what it is. Oh, here's another way. Have you ever had heavy anesthesia, like general anesthesia for surgery, or being put out for having your teeth removed or something? Oh, well, then that doesn't count.
Oh, keep going though, because anesthesia fascinates me.
Yeah. Well, if you've ever had like general anesthesia or very heavy anesthesia, it's a lovely experiential experiment, because basically you disappear, but you don't stop existing. Your body disappears, your senses disappear, your mind disappears, everything entirely disappears, but it's not nothing. And when you come back, you can't say what it was, but it's not nothing. Or even going to sleep is similar, depending on how deeply asleep you are.
The dreamless sleep. Dreamless sleep is the same.
Yeah, well, I mean, I meant sleep as opposed to dreaming sleep.
What about like feeling Kundalini energy or being real high on some psychedelic and?
Well, all of that. The point is that you can't extricate these different dimensions. They're all always present. So you can't say, oh, that's it, and that is, they aren't discrete, they aren't separate. But we're used to classifying certain modes as being actual, and basically by not addressing them, we devalue all these other modes that are essentially nothing. But the point I'm trying to make is if you look within your experience, you can find concretely, experientially, without imagining it, qualities of experience that are completely beyond, let's say. And when you find out, where is that happening? Where's that in relation to anything else? I mean, who do you feel the vision and then go just past it? What's outside it? Just right now, concretely, just do it. Just feel the vision, just like go outside it. It doesn't stop. You don't hit a wall.
Thought.
Is it thought? Is that where thought happens? Go another direction then. So you feel the vision is here, and then thoughts like surrounding it, like a target, like another layer of an onion. Explore your subtle anatomy, but not in the abstract. Explore it concretely. Look at take an inventory of this experiential field. What's in it, and how is it in it? What's the relationship of its subsystems to each other? To me, it's very, very obvious. I don't think it's that hard. I mean, I know we're not. No, but we're not used to doing that. We're used to sort of smearing it all together and imagining it's all like in my body. But if you look at it, just sort of pull the pieces apart and look at them sitting here, they all exist autonomously in their own little space, and they don't step on each other, and they don't have a simple spatial orientation to each other. It's not like the field of hearing is 2 feet above and a couple of inches behind the field of vision. It's not like that at all. They exist, but it's each in their own little space, their own little experiential dimension. But and those dimensions don't impinge on each other. So when sound is present, light doesn't change. When sound stops, light doesn't change. When sound starts, light doesn't change. And when light changes, sound doesn't change. So they don't impinge on each other. It's not like, a sound happens and all the light, splashes out.
Well, what about experiences of synesthesia?
That's theoretical. You have an experience of synesthesia right now, and then you tell me what it's about.
What is synesthesia?
Like you see color or you hear color.
Oh,
or something.
right.
I mean, in some ways, when you speak about looking at a visual field, and Peter describes that it doesn't impinge upon the field of hearing, to me, whatever it is that recognizes that those fields don't impinge, in a sense, like somehow that's concretely so. And that's, to me, one example of something that is completely outside of, like, what sense is that?
Yeah, first.
What word can you use to describe that which recognizes those fields not impinging on each other? That's obviously the case.
Sure.
That would be one example that feels very concrete to me. There's nothing abstract about it. Right.
But there's nothing abstract about
describe that.
There's nothing abstract about anything. Thought creates abstraction by imagining that it is so. In fact, everything that is present is concretely present. There's nothing. Abstraction doesn't exist. It literally does not exist.
Surprisingly, definition leads to abstraction.
Yeah. But even when that's happening, it's a concrete presence.
Oh, yes.
But it's not what it pretends to be. But nothing is what it pretends to be, so that makes it very easy. the same one size fits all.
Right, so my little synesthesia, suddenly everything is just made up of sound. I mean, it's not only made up of sound, but it's like I look at the plant and it's made up of sound. It's almost music.
Well, yeah, but what do you mean by that? You're perceiving light, right?
I'm perceiving light, but I'm perceiving it as it's.
What do you mean when you say as sound?
Those are sounds.
No, it's not that. It's like, it's almost like vibration.
Yeah, it's vibrant, sure, but light is that.
And so is sound.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're the same, but they're different. They have different textures. Light is immediately distinguishable from sound because the frequency of light vibration is different than the frequency of sound vibration. So there's a big textural difference. It's hard to know. To think. Am I hearing that? Is that a sound I'm hearing, or is that something I'm seeing? I mean, that's not a question that you ask yourself very often because they're so obviously distinct in their texture.
But it has to do with like just the sense of it being made up of sound. Right?
Well, it's not made up of sound. It's made up of vibrancy. That's the radiance. But that's not sound. But when I say sound, I'm talking about a particular bandwidth of experience.
But the vibrancy is, it can be experienced. I mean, it's like, it seems like it can be experienced that.
Of course. Right. It's always experienced that. You're only experiencing vibration. There's nothing else to experience.
And I'm like, almost like calling it sound, like recognizing the soundness of vibration as opposed to the light of vibration.
It's a bias in how you're thinking of it. I mean, touch is the same, light is the same, vision is the same, sound is the same, thought is the same. Thought is a vibratory presence. It's a radiant presence, but it has a very different frequency than the frequency of light, for example.
But it's all one continuum.
It's one continuum, and it's all one thing that works in one way, but the different bandwidths, levels of bandwidth are quite distinct from each other because they have a different texture.
Oh, what about like the haptic sense of like I look at that ball over there, right, and there's a way in which I can feel the roundness of it in perceiving it visually.
It's a complex engagement. None of these things exist in isolation, but it's important to be able to, for purposes of exploration, it's important to be able to disentangle them. To notice the difference between your senses and notice the way in which they are distinct. I think typically for people that haven't examined their own experience very closely, it's easy to think it's all just kind of one thing that's just sort of here, and it's all sort of blend together, and it's all like the body, and it's shaped like the body. But if you look, it's not shaped like the body at all. Field of vision is a sideways oval with fuzzy edges like this. Field of hearing has its own kind of a shape. It's kind of like, it's almost like a loose circle or a loose sphere with sort of wings on the side. I don't know what. I mean, it's not, you can't pin it down exactly. Field of touch is a sort of a fuzzy blob with with some sort of degree of extrusions where the limbs are, but it's just sort of like a blobby shape. And they don't exist on top of each other. They each exist in their own space, in their own dimension, in their own thought bubble, you might say. And the same with mind, look where, picture, let's say imaging mind. Picture a green tree with bright red flowers in it. Where's that happening? It's not happening in your field of vision, right? It's not happening in your field of hearing. Where's it happening? in its own space, its own sort of dimension. And so you can kind of look at this kind of thing and just separate these things out and notice how they're separate bandwidths, they're separate portions of your experience, rather than just lumping them all together clumsily. Look at what's deconstruct it, look at what's really going on. And then look at, is that all that's going on? Where's what's seeing? So here's the field of vision floating there. Where's what's seeing the field of vision? Where's it? You know, I mean, things like that. Anyway, these are just experiments you can play. And if you do that, you can discover that there's a whole lot more to you, there's a whole lot more to the actual experiential field than any of these little subsystems. And it'll put that into perspective.
It seems like inner seeing and inner hearing and inner tasting are all different fields too.
Sure.
There's a sense that they all seem to be held together in a way, and yet they aren't. That they're all independent or separate, but you know, but then in another sense, they all are you.
Yeah, well, they are all the breaking edge of the radiance within it as the experiential field. It's like a single event with many different like a spectrum or think of a rainbow. You know, so it's one thing, but it has very distinct degrees of density, so you could say, or differences of texture. And the value of doing this is to notice that something that's going on in one band of texture isn't necessarily going on in the other bands, as opposed to simplistically thinking of your experience more dully and more stupidly as just being this here. If anything's happening, it seems to be, you know, sort of everything and seems to be big. Whereas if you take an inventory of the actual space, the actual dimension and range of textures of the experience, you'll notice that certain events happen in really small portions of it. Especially like events like pain. Pain can be really interesting to look at. Pain happens in a very small portion of the experiential field. Most of the experiential field doesn't experience pain. So when you're experiencing pain, a specific pain, actually, if you look around, you'll be able to find that most of your experience is not in pain. It's not, the pain is there, but it's there here. And over here, there's no pain. And over here, there's no pain. And over here, there's no pain. And over here, there's no pain.
Does it all happen in the field of touch?
What it all?
Pain?
Yes, largely.
So if I'm feeling like I experience things from the inside, like it's like I'm feeling objects from inside themselves. That's just a permutation of the sense field of touching.
Probably not. I don't know.
Or like I feel sort of a rootedness or something like that.
Feel what?
Rootedness. Like, yeah. It feels like that's a certain aspect of the field of touch. It's
Well, it's subtle because all experience is felt. So the entire field of experience is actually touch. Touch, in a certain sense, is the primary. It's the primary sense. Light is felt in everything. If you experience something, you're feeling it. You're feeling its presence. But not with your hands or not with your body. Contact, yeah, it's felt. There's no remove. The dynamic texture of it is immediately engaged with full presence. So everything is felt. So but again, when you're talking about the sense of touch, you're specifically talking about bodily sensations. But then you can, I can go in my imagination and I can imagine I'm picking up a rock and I can feel what the rock feels like, but my body's not feeling that. That's in another part. That's in another band. That's than this.
Is that the same thing? Like I sort of feel into you, and I feel like I can feel the inside of your skin.
Sure, but that's not a sense of touch. That's a different portion of the bandwidth.
Well, what is that exactly?
Well, there's no language.
Oh.
I love your phone.
Yeah. I feel like I'm James Bond there.
Yeah, I know, it's very 60s spine for sure. Well, anyway, it's about quitting time, so I will shut down this broadcast.